this. All right, can you see my screen? Yes, no? Let me make sure everyone can see. Oh, you can see me. Okay. So I can't hear anyone. Akanksha, are you there? Can you speak?
Yes, sorry, I would just hide myself from the screen. We can see you and hear you.
I just want to confirm that you can see it, and then we can get started.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do the entire screen just to make sure that it works.
Yep, that works.
So you can see?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, everybody, for running late. Technical difficulties. I'm not in my normal environment. That might have been one of the reasons, but we'll go through this quickly. So this presentation is how to get your first B2B product design job. Just to tell you a little bit about me, I was a founder of a company in 1995 to 2002. I was the first employee of Marketo, which is a successful SaaS company from 2007 to 2016. When I left, it had 1,400 people. I was the first employee. I've been head of product management, head of product marketing. I've been mentoring people for a long time. 3 kids and a dog and a wife who sings. That's about me. I want to give everybody a warning. Even though I'm telling you, like, this is how you do it, and if you follow these steps, it will work, it's still a lot of information. It is not what you've been told by other people, and it is not an easy thing to do. It takes hard work to do it. But if you follow these steps, you absolutely will get a B2B product design job. Probably it's a 6-figure job, and it has a lot of benefits. One of my superpowers is radical candor. I am going to say what I think the facts are. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm just going to be completely honest with you about these things. So first, what is a B2B product design job? It is not mobile design. If you went to school to learn to be a product designer and they taught you mobile design, they were teaching you something that you do not need to be a product designer. Mobile product design is not product design. This is not what the job is. It's not this. This is B2C work. This is something else. Although there is some mobile stuff that you can get in a B2B job, it is few and far between. It's almost always something else. It's additionally not the website. I haven't designed a website in 20 years. Like it's not the website. It has nothing to do with the website. That's the marketing team. So if you're thinking like, oh, you can do websites, that's not what this job is. Additionally, it's not really graphic design. I mean, once in a while, you might be asked to make an icon. Once in a while, maybe an empty state illustration, but mostly it's not graphic design. You do not need to be a great graphic designer. It is a nice to have the ability to do some drawing, but honestly, for the job, it is not a requirement at all. If you were thinking like, oh, I want a graphic design job, that is not a product design job. Is it a dedicated researcher job? No, it is not a dedicated researcher job. That's not what product design is. If you went to school and they were teaching you all about how to do research, they were not teaching you how to do the actual job of product design. It is not dedicated UX writing, although you may have to write a little bit of text. That is not the job. That is not what you should be able to do some basic writing, but it is not a dedicated position for UX writing. That's not what we're talking about here. So what we are talking about is enterprise B2B applications. They have panels and toolbars and different views and multiple scroll bars and tabs. That's how you know that you're looking at a B2B product. And it's designing this. What we're looking at right now is Jira. It's one of the most popular B2B products on the planet. And it looks like software. There is all of these different buttons and panels and things. It is a dense application. If you're thinking, oh, I love padding and minimalism, like That's not what product design is. It is density. You need lots of information on the screen at any given time. It is also like there are some things I'm going to call light B2B, which is something like this. This is Outlook. So Outlook is used by millions and millions of people, and it has a desktop and website kind of parity to it. And it is kind of a software looking thing, but I'll call it light B2B because it is used by many millions of people. Very often, if you're a B2B product designer, your products are going to be used by a few hundred people, a few thousand people, and if you're very successful, a few tens of thousands of people. But it is very rare that it's used by millions of people. That's B2C. Software like SaaS software is the vast majority of product design software. It is customizable. It is metadata driven. It has multiple layouts. It's domain specific. When I say domain specific, what I mean is like this is Salesforce. It's for sales. There is products like Zendesk. It is for support systems. There's for every industry in the world, there's software for them. As an example, I worked for a company that made software to help do maintenance on a steel mill, right? That's B2B product design. A steel mill, if you think of the software that they use, like you might not even think that that exists, but there's companies that make those exact things. Data visualization is a huge part of product design. It's all over the place. This is a tool called Tableau. It's one of the most popular business intelligence tools. They have all of these things, data panes and data sources, dimensions, and the data source tab and legends and views. There's so much here that you have to understand. And you can see there's a certain amount of density and complexity to this. B2B product design jobs look like this. This is the kind of density we're talking about. A day in the life of a product designer, you're talking about meetings, Jira, Wiki, being in Zoom, like whether it's an in-person meeting or a Zoom meeting, that's a day in the life of a product designer. You are not spending 8 hours a day in Figma, but you do spend a certain amount of time in Figma. But that's a day in the life. This is what this job looks like. Notice how research is not a huge, like doing external ethnographic interviews of people. That is not a big part of your day. Additionally, what you're doing every day is problem solving. You're making specs, you're looking at the details, and you're working with your team. Product design, product managers, engineers. Those are the main people you work with. Sometimes a project manager and sometimes a QA person will be involved too. But that's what you're doing as a product designer, is solving the problems. So here's the good news about this. The product design job that I'm describing has the most stability. You like B2C jobs, game design jobs, mobile design jobs, they are not stable. Like you very often get laid off in those kind of positions. B2B jobs are much more stable. They also have excellent pay. We're talking about between 100 and 200,000 for new designers. And that a lot of these jobs are remote. I'm hiring, I think, 50 designers, and I'm looking for a lot of junior designers next year. And it is really good pay, and you can live in low-cost places. You also get great career advancement. When you're a mobile designer, you're not going to get promoted to product designer 2 and senior product designer and director of product design. Like that's much harder to do. But in B2B product design, it is much easier. And once in a while, periodically, you can actually be creative. But I would say creativity is not the number one part of this job. It is much more about paying attention to the details, understanding user interface. So I'm going to go through all of those things. So here's my 3-step program that we're going to go through. First, you have to actually be a good designer. That is part of getting a job as a designer. You think you might be a good product designer right now, and we're going to go through it, but I think that you are missing a bunch of the things. Second, you have to have a compelling digital presence. What I mean by that is your resume, LinkedIn, and your website. You cannot get one of these jobs without that presence. I will tell you exactly what you need to do. It is not that hard to have a compelling digital presence. And then the third is you need to interview well. And interviewing well, again, there is a very easy way and a free way to do this. Everything I'm going to describe to you is going to be, it takes time, but it does not take money. So first step, I want you to be an actually good product designer. Now, you might say, oh, I already know how to design. I went to school and I went to a boot camp, and so they taught me how to design. Unfortunately, I don't think that they did. I think that most colleges, most boot camps, they are not doing a good job of teaching people how to do the job of product design. And it's really frustrating for me because they could be teaching that stuff, but they are not. And so you might be thinking that you wasted all of that time and money, and it is possible that you wasted some time and money, but college has some other benefits and every person is unique. So I don't want to just say it's always a waste of time and money, but it is almost definite you did not learn the things you need to learn. The good news is you can learn them. Now, this is what I've heard a lot of designers coming out of school who know how to do. They can do some web design, some light product design, mobile design. They know how to do interviewing and research, and they know how to write case studies. But what really I need you to know is how to be a master of Figma, how to understand what enterprise design looks like, interaction design specifics, knowing more about information architecture, knowing basics of programming. Like that is a huge part of product design, is working with engineers, and you have to know the basics of what they do. The next is how companies work. They don't teach you how companies work, but that's actually a big part of the job. And this is like working with Jira, working with wikis, and how to get what you want done, even though there's lots of different people that have a say in what's happening. Differentiation is a thing that they don't really teach, and it's crucial. I'm going to go through all of these things in this presentation. Additionally, presentation skills are really important, and probably the most important thing of all is how to be adaptable. Adaptability is a key thing for being successful. In any B2B company, you're going to be thrown many different kinds of problems and situations, and you need to be able to just say, okay, let me work that problem and not be thrown just because something changes. Okay, so let's start with how to actually do the job of product design. We're going to open up the book and a nice rainbow will appear. Okay. I love this. This animation just keeps going and going. Okay, that should be the end with the fish. All right, we'll move on to, I need you to be a master of Figma. There was actually a post on LinkedIn where somebody said, it doesn't matter whether you're good or not or Figma. And I was just thinking, it's so crucial. It's literally what I start with. And then if you don't know Figma, it slows you down to a crawl. That this is the tool we use. We do not use another tool. There's a little bit of stuff that happens in Miro, but mostly what's happening is in Figma. And if you don't know how to use all of the pieces of Figma, it is going to make it much harder for you to get the job and much harder for you to do the job. And I'm talking about being a true master of auto layout and constraints, components, variants, libraries, how to do smart animate, how to use properties to their fullest, how to use variables, and really how to make prototypes. It is just killing me when designers are still using rectangles instead of frames, or they're using groups, or they're not naming their layers. That there's craftsmanship that goes into this job. And when I interview people, if they're not a strong Figma user, I generally reject them from the job. Most designers are bad at Figma. I don't mean that they have minimum skills. I mean that they have less than minimum skills. They're actively using the product incorrectly. I would say very few have mastery, and even like there's a small group that's good. But if you can get into this blue area, then you're going to be in that top 15% and you're going to get jobs. And I even crossed off the word new. Most designers in general are not good at Figma. And it is slowing down the whole industry because we're not using this tool properly. This is one that I think is really important. You should be reading design books. Probably the most important one is this green one at the bottom called About Face by Alan Cooper. But there are other books as well. The key is there's really great information in these books about information architecture, about messaging, about designing. And if you're not reading these books, you're really diminishing your influences and you're looking like every other candidate. And I'm telling you right now, 99% of candidates haven't read a single book. And if they have, it's The Design of Everyday Things. That's the book that people read. The books like Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, that's like a child's book. You need to read serious designer professional books. If you've read Design of Everyday Things and not read Emotional Design, you're really missing out, because Don Norman changed his entire point of view on Design of Everyday Things when he wrote this second book. And it completely changed my thinking about how I design what I design. But About Face, again, if you read only one book, this is the most serious book about interaction design there is. Information architecture is a key thing to understand. When I say information architecture, it's how are you breaking up information on the page? This is an old version of Microsoft Word and a new version, and you can see how they're creating different structures to show information and controls. When you have a dense application, if you remember back at the Tableau example I gave, there's so many different varieties of information and action. You really need to understand how to lay it out on a screen. You cannot be making these giant HD screens and think like, oh, I have room for everything. And you have to make it available to people with smaller screens. Like, for example, for me, 20% of my audience has a 1280 width resolution. That's really small. That's a small laptop. So I really need to think about how I'm showing information on those smaller screens. You can't just say, well, screw those people. That's not going to work. You need to make it scalable for all groups. There's another side of information architecture, which is the layout of it. This layout of information in a hierarchy, then a list, then the detail was the standard best practice. Now that's changed as screens became more horizontal, where the list and the detail went side by side instead of top and bottom. And then when phones came out, it introduced yet another different kind of information layout that had to work when the screens were tall instead of wide. But this is what information architecture is all about. And almost every designer I meet doesn't know how it works, even advanced senior designers. This is a layout that I use for all different sorts of projects that I've had. It is a global navigational strip on the left, a search bar with different kind of hierarchical objects that you can navigate, a main canvas area that can have tabs on the top or on the bottom, and panels that can come out and that can be pinned. This is a general B2B layout that you can use for 1,000 different projects. The idea that too many different B2B designers are designing as if the application was a website. You really need to stop thinking of these things as websites, even though it goes in a browser, and start thinking of it more like software. Like this is treated more like software instead of like a website where there's a navigation, like as a hamburger menu, for example. I think that you should study the history of software. Now, this might be a huge thing and like you get down a rabbit hole, but look at early versions of software, early versions of Google Sheets, early versions of like that will turn into Excel, which before that was Lotus 1-2-3, and before that was VisiCalc. But if you really understand how software was invented and made, like from Xerox PARC that invented windows and menus and pointers and icons. Like there were no icons before this place called Xerox PARC. And you could easily go on YouTube and just do a search for Xerox PARC or history of user interface. It's going to tell you all sorts of interesting things. But it's very difficult to make a good user interface if you don't know the history of how software has been developed. This is a rule that I use, I call rule number 1. If you do not understand it, you can't design it. So when you're doing design work, knowing the details, understanding the little things that are happening, whether that's the logic of it or the interactivity of it, or even the animation of how it moves or the colors of how it connects with other things on the screen, the details matter. And I think that way too many designers don't pay attention to the details and don't have this rule in their heads. Understanding interaction design, I would encourage you all to go to a website called ant.design, A-N-T.design. It is just a regular design component library, but click on components and actually go through every component. Every component works a certain way. Like when you think of a drop-down box, or you think of a date picker, or you think of a radio button, they all have very specific interaction. And you should go through it in detail. It would only take you a couple of hours to go through every component in Ant Design, but it is a nice full-featured library that shows every kind of component and all of their variants. And take your own notes about how it works. But again, most new designers have absolutely no idea what the different kinds of interaction design components exist. There are patterns of how to use these, like how to use trees or how to use tabs. Nielsen Norman has a ton of good patterns, but if you don't understand patterns, you're just going to make mistakes. And this is, again, all of this stuff should be taught in schools, and they're not. When you are making your prototypes, there's kind of three levels. You have an abstraction prototype, which is mostly, boxes and arrows and pointing things of like, how is it generally going to work? A tool like Miro or FigJam is perfectly acceptable for that. But then once you're into the, I'm going to show really how it works, is in a prototype in Figma. I'm going to ask you all to do something that, again, almost every designer doesn't do this. And I don't know why. Don't show people your canvas. Don't be panning and zooming around a canvas trying to show your work. Make a prototype. Make a cover sheet. Say, this is what you can see, and let them click and go through the prototypes. Even if some parts of it have storyboards that go from step to step to step, but please stop showing people your canvas. It's not a pleasant way to experience your work. The prototype is. And of course, the checked-in experience is also part of what you're responsible for. You need to be watching what the engineers do and pay attention to the details, because they might really miss a lot of the details you have in your prototype. When I was at Pixar they had a tour that showed me what they do, and I saw they had this storyboard for a movie. And the movie that I was looking at was called Up. And the storyboard was on this gigantic wall, and they would point to every square and tell the story of the movie, just acting it out. And they would work out the problems and they would make it better through the storyboard. Storyboards are a great way to explain what you're doing. I actually do that very often in PowerPoint. I will make a storyboard that goes slide to slide to slide. Today, I was doing a demo of a product and I used slides to do it just because it was a controlled experience. Figma can sometimes be slow or have problems. This is an example of something I made. This is in PowerPoint. It is a UI where every single thing you're looking at is except for like the images and the icons, it is a PowerPoint thing. Now, this looks super ugly, but remember, this is 2007, so give it a little grace that it would look better. But I actually showed this UI of dragging something over to explain to the engineers how I wanted the system to work. And that this one slide created Marketo, which eventually became a public offering and a billion-dollar company. And it was a huge part of why we were successful, is how it was kinetic and you could drag things on. So sometimes you really need to hammer home what the interactivity is like. This is an early design, and it got better as the versions went along. Okay, we're going on to step 2, and I'm going very fast because we just have a lot to cover and I started late and I want to give some time for questions if I can. So step 2, have a compelling presence. That means LinkedIn and your website. It also means your resume. Do I have the resume in there? I think I will. I'll have the resume. So first is do not use a template. Do not use a template for your resume, and don't make your website be exactly like everybody else's website. Specifically on the resume, you can Google great designer resumes and copy something that you see that really inspires you. But I have never in my entire life heard of a person who uses AI to read resumes for product design positions. It doesn't exist. Anybody who tells you, oh, it's got to have keywords because they're using an AI to read it, I don't know what they're talking about. No product design position does that. Human beings look at your resume. So make your resume look like a designer made it. Don't make it look like a computer made it or an accountant made it. Now, it should look nice the way that you want it to look. You might have it a little more styled like this. You might have it more styled like this. This is actually what my resume looks like. And I made it look the way it makes me happy. And that's okay. But the point is, please design your resume and don't make it look like an accountant made it. AI resumes, they are not useful. This is what I'm talking about. Don't make your resume look like this. Don't make your resume multiple pages. I've been working since 1995. This is my resume. Like, I don't need to have all of that those extra pages or extra stuff. If I don't need it, then you don't need it either. One page is plenty, but definitely do not make it look boring like this. Now, the whole goal of your resume and your website is that you want to be selected. You want to say yes to this person. So I want to give you just a little insight into what's going on the other side. So when I was hiring at a different company, Treasure Data, we use this tool called Lever. So Lever is an applicant tracking system. This is really what it looks like. It has a pipeline where you have new applicants, the leads, how many people you have as a phone interview, who's on the on-site interview, and then you get to the offer stage. You have, in any one of these, you have a list of names. So when I see your name, I'm doing the work of trying to find a person to hire. And so I'm clicking one at a time through them. I see your resume already. I'm going to click on the details and see it. I'll see your other links in here automatically. So when I'm looking at you, you are not one of one. You're one of 50. You're number 23 of the day, right? So when I'm looking through these things and I click on your resume and it says, hi, I'm Robert. I know you're Robert. I'm the one who clicked on your website. And so all of these websites that are trying to talk to me as if I stumbled upon your website, I'm not stumbling upon your website. It's a link in here that I'm clicking on. Now, the metric you should be thinking about is for every job you apply to, how many phone screens do you get? If you apply to 100 jobs, do you get 10 phone screens? That would be a 10% application to phone screen metric. That's the metric you need to be thinking about. If you are getting below 1%, your website is not doing its job. The whole job of your resume, website, and LinkedIn is very specifically this metric: get the phone screens. And that when you click on somebody, there's literally buttons in here. It doesn't show it in here, but there's a button that tells me, yes, I want to bring them to the phone screen step, or no, I want to reject them. And that's it. That's the only choice I have, yes or no. Your resume and your website is trying to get that yes. If it doesn't get that yes, then your website is failing you. Now, remember, the average time, this is from a research on uxdesign.cc, the average amount of time people spend on your site during recruiting is going to be under 5 minutes, 35% of the time, 5 to 10 minutes, 54%. Now, this was a poll. When you look at the statistics on your site, and I'll show you exactly how to do it, you're going to notice that these numbers are exaggerated. Most of the time, people are going to be under 3 minutes. You do not have a lot of time with people on your site. So right now, people are using Squarespace and Wix and Webflow to make your sites. And you're probably grabbing some template and doing it the way that everyone else does it. It is really problematic if every single resume or website that is being looked at is always the same. So it is good to have the template because it gives you this tablet to phone to, it all looks correct. But if it looks exactly like everybody else's website, well, then I, as a applicant tracking person, I'm like literally trying to find people to talk to, I'm going to have a serious problem because everyone's going to look the same. So if you think about it, if I'm looking through 50 people, I have a bar of how good does somebody need to be for me to say, yes, I want to talk to them. Now, on the first person, the bar might not be that high, but by the time I'm in the 40s for the day, the bar is actually higher because I've already said yes to a bunch of people. And if I say more yeses, then I'm going to overload myself with too many phone calls. So I'm trying to figure out who is above the bar. When I see a website that's the same, it's very difficult for me to know whether or not I should say yes. Usually the answer is not going to be yes. But if the site is different, then all of a sudden it wakes me up and says, oh, let me look at what's going on here. Now, here's how you can tell what's going on. There's these tools. All of these are the same. You can use any one of these things. It makes no difference. The one that's the one I use is called Hotjar. Now, these are called video session recording tools. You put a piece of JavaScript on your site. It works with Wix and Squarespace and Webflow. It works with all these different tools. You put the JavaScript on. Every one of these are free, so you do not need to pay for these. And they will basically make a video. Now, this is a video from my site from a little while ago, and you'll notice that there's a mouse there. I can see them scrolling. I see where it was, where they're coming from, what country it is. I hear the clicking of like when they click on things. I know exactly how much time. It's a 1 minute and 19-second session. You need to put this on your site. Every single one of you can put this on your site today. There is no cost. There is no effort involved. And you could start watching videos tomorrow. If you are not doing this, how do you know what is happening? How do you know what people are clicking on your site? How do you know anything about your site if you're not watching the people? It is absolutely crazy to me that 99% of the people I mentor on ADP lists don't have this on their site and have no idea what's going on. They don't know how much time people are spending. They don't know what they're clicking on. They don't know what they're doing. Then I'm going to go back to differentiate yourself from the pack. You got all these people that say, hi, I'm Janice. Hi, I'm Fred. Hi, I am Sandeep. And every single one of them looks the same. It says hi with the hand wave, and then underneath it's project, 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 project. And then I go to one of the projects and it's a super long scrolling page. It's always a super long scrolling page. It always looks the same. I click on the about page. It's one picture that's not even particularly good and a bunch of nonsense about what they do with zero links and zero ability for me to get to know you better. That is what you're up against. That is 99% of the entire audience out there. So just imagine for a second, if your website started by looking like this. Like, what do you want? You want the minimalist website, or do you want the super deluxe Glenn package, or whatever your name is? If your name is Nancy, get the most Nancy website in the world. And you gave these two links. If you imagine for a second that every hiring manager is going to click the minimalist and then leave, you're out of your mind. They're absolutely going to click on the expressive one. They're probably going to click on both, in fact. And it's interesting to find out which one do they click on first, which one do they click on second. If you made two different links, and remember, you don't have to pay extra to Squarespace if you made extra pages, but if you made these extra pages, you would be giving the person hiring a chance to choose their own adventure. You're trying to get a job as an interaction designer and your website is completely non-interactive. This makes it interactive. It lets me be involved in what do I want to see. This is just one idea of how you can make your site be different. This is another example. I went to this website called Divi and I just pressed inspect and completely changed the way that it looks. And imagine that you can click a video and you're going to pop up in the video and start talking to the person and have like a much more richer experience. Almost every website is minimalist. Why would you want to be minimalist? Everyone else is minimalist. If I'm looking at a bunch of sites and they're all minimalist, that means nothing to me. It means nothing, because what am I supposed to do when everyone's doing the exact same thing? I can't figure out who to hire. This is another, like, this is a nice website. He does say, hi, my name is David. But if you ever go to this site, and I haven't been there in like a year, but it's deeply animated with a bunch of interesting stuff. Now, he is a programmer, so he can do some more interesting things, but you've got to figure out how to differentiate yourself. I think a lot of people have their website with nonsensical content, poor responsiveness, the wrong images, broken links, grammar mistakes, spacing errors, and they go, okay, this is fine. Like, I don't, I'm not unhappy with my website. Like, you almost think of it as a checkbox that you just have to do. But this is the thing that's going to get you the job or not. Okay, let's jump into step 3, interviewing well. First is ADP List is like a miracle worker for this. You should do mock interviews. Book time with product design managers and say, I want you to do a mock interview with me. Interview me for about 20 minutes and then ask me all the questions you normally ask. And then after the 20 minutes, tell me how I did. And then what you're going to notice after the first 5 is that you're starting to get some repeat questions. And then after the first 10, you're going to be like, wow, I haven't heard a new question in a while. And then after 15, you're going to be like, I'm completely nailing these questions because I've thought of several different ways to answer it. And in talking with all of these people, I'm like, I figured out like the perfect answers. And by the time you get to the 20th mock interview, you're like, I can interview with anybody and feel really confident. So this is so easy and free. Book time and ask for a mock interview. Ask them to interview you and tell you how you did. And that you're going to get weird answers of good answer, bad answer. But once you're through 20, you're going to see the patterns and know what works for you. Now, to set up for success in the Zoom call that you're doing these interviews, and it's almost always a Zoom call, make sure that your environment looks nice. Put books or plants behind you. Make sure that you have a good microphone, right? Make sure you have good lighting. Like, I'm hating the lighting that I have right now, but like, I'm not in my home environment. Try not to wear headphones. Actually use the speakers in your computer, use the microphone. Don't take it in a car. Don't take it in a crowded cafe. This tells me that you're not serious for the job. If you make the environment nice, they know that you are like, they're imagining working with you and you feel like a real human being, not like an anonymous person with a white background and they don't know who you are. There's a thing called informational interviews, which are really important. So this is what you do. You reach out on LinkedIn to people who have the job that you want. If you want to be a product designer, you look for product designers, product designer 2, senior product designers, and you say, hi, I'm doing some informational interviews trying to learn more about product design. Would you be willing to let me interview you for about 20, 30 minutes? It would mean a lot. You should expect about a 1 in 10 response, but some people will say, sure. Now, when you get there, you should ask questions like, how did you discover design? What do you do on a regular day? What makes your day? What ruins your day? What makes a great designer? Have you ever worked with a recruiter? If they have, you say, I'd like to interview them as well. Can you introduce me? Getting in touch with recruiters is an amazing door opener. Just blind applying is not nearly as good as working with a recruiter. Now, when you do these interviews, you're probably going to be feeling anxiety, you're rambling, you're nervous, you're insecure. This is where the practice of both the mock interviews and the informational interviews will, by the time you do 20 of them each, you're going to feel so confident and so comfortable in these environments, all of your nerves will go away. And a key thing is to be yourself. Like, don't wear a mask. Don't like be super professional. And the reason is, let's do it through math. You do 100 interviews, and let's imagine you act super professional and that you get 10 yeses that they want to work with you. Now, those yeses are going to be weak preference because you're going to be doing the exact same thing as many other people, just acting professionally and being fine. And now if you act like yourself, and by yourself, what I mean is let yourself have the opinions you actually have and be comfortable saying, I disagree with you, or that's really interesting. I never thought of that. And acting as if you were just friends with the person. Now you might get the same yes, but that yes is not going to be the same yes because you would have been different than other people, not just the regular. You're going to get a strong preference. And that strong preference makes the difference between getting hired and not getting hired, or enjoying your job or not enjoying your job. So it really is important to be yourself, and that will help you stand out. Now, when they ask you, do you know how to do something? Generally speaking, you want to be optimistic. This is easier for men, apparently, to say like, oh yeah, I totally know how to do that. But I'm saying to everyone, whether you're super confident in Figma or not, you have to come confident. So if they say, do you know how to use variables in Figma? You say yes. And when the interview's over, you go study the heck out of that. And that I've done that in my career, and I've actually learned a tremendous amount that is very useful. But you should be confident when you're in the room, in the interview. Now, I want you to imagine yourself, they're going to ask, hey, do you have any questions for me? This is the question I want you to ask them. Don't ask them, what's the culture like? They're going to give you a bullshit answer. Don't ask them, like things that you can find out in other ways. What you want to say is, imagine a year from now, after you've hired the perfect person, the best designer, how would you know that they were great? What evidence of success would you see? What does it look like if they're successful? This is a psychological trick. You are making them think about a successful person, and they're going to tell you, and at the end of the interview, they're going to map all of the good things they just said to you. So you want to trick them into loving you. This is the best way to do it. It is a social hack, but it works, and there's no reason why not to do it. It also tells you a lot about who they are and what they value by how they describe the success. Okay, we're getting to the end. How long will this take? It is roughly 1 to 7 months. That's how long it takes to get a product design job if you do the things that are in here. Some people, I've told them all these things, they did the steps, and a month later, they had an offer in hand. The longest it's ever taken somebody was 7 months. Now, I've been in situations like 2018 for me was a brutal year, and I went like almost a year without work, and it was really difficult for me. But for a new designer, this is the amount of time that I've seen. And every single person who has gone through this series of steps has landed a product design position. But you can't you got to either do it or don't do it. There's no oh, well, I'll try to put Hotjar on my site. It takes 5 minutes. You could have done it already during this meeting. You've got to put this on your site. You can't try to do these things. You have to just do them. Make it a daily ritual. Finding a job is like an 8-hour-a-day job. You need to do the work. Okay, so we talked about how to be a good designer, how to have a compelling presence, and how to interview well. I apologize for being late. It was a technical thing that, it was blocking me from entering. I had to go into incognito mode, but hopefully we got through this and it wasn't too overwhelming. Thank you all. That's my website at the top there. And I'm available for booking. I usually do things on Fridays. So I'm going to stop my share and open it up to questions with the time that we have left. Akansha, do you have where do I see the questions? Oh, here, sorry, Q&A. So I'm looking at the Q&A section, not the chat section for right now. So one is from BS Senior Product Manager. Great insights, Glenn. Thank you. What are the most effective strategies for breaking into the B2B product design field, especially for those with limited experience or non-traditional backgrounds? I've actually hired many designers who weren't designers. One of the most successful designers I ever hired was a doc writer, but she really had a good sense of design, and I had her read About Face, and that was the number one thing to do. And she ended up being incredibly successful. She's leading a big part of product design at Amplitude, I believe. There's another product designer named Atanasio who came from the support team. And again, I had him read About Face and worked with him, and he was an incredibly good manager and designer. So you don't need to go to school and get a certificate. All you need is to be able to do the job, and it's the things that I described. I don't know if anybody can speak in this or if we can unmute people, but hopefully that answered your question. Cecilia asks, can you be a product designer without being a UX designer first? Yes, of course. Like you don't, I mean, at this point, like the words product design and UX design and interaction designer have all merged together and they're kind of meaningless. So I wouldn't worry about it. If you read About Face by Alan Cooper, if you get to be a master of Figma, you can get a product design job. Do the things that I'm describing and you can be there very quickly. We're gonna have to wrap up in just a couple of minutes. They're there soon. But thank you so much for an insightful workshop. Is there any way to get a copy of this slide deck? I'll try to make it available and share it off of, it's a PowerPoint deck, so I'll try to share it off of Microsoft. So I'll try to make that available, Sarah. In a case study presentation, how would the designer talk about their impact on a feature if it wasn't shipped because of shift in the company priorities? I think in general, you want to tell the story, but this is another great example of how if you didn't make your case study one giant long page, you actually can tell the story much easier. So imagine for a second that wasn't a thing, that making one giant long page was not the way that you actually showed a case study. Instead, if you imagine it was a menu and the menu said what the problem was, how did we get started, what happened, what were my designs in the middle, who did I talk to, what did the company shifted priorities, what happened next, and then let the user, the hiring manager, click what they want. Now, if you're watching on Hotjar, you'll see what they click on, and whatever they click on, you go to that page and you make it a little better. You put a little more information on it. What you'll find is some pages get 0 clicks and some pages get all the clicks. That is the audience's way of telling you what they're interested in hearing about. In general, I don't mind if you show something on a case study that didn't ship. I don't care if it shipped or not. That's not what I care about. What I care about is, do you know how to design? Can you show me your design work? Can you show me your good work? If you can show me that, then I'll hire you. I don't care what the company did. So just save variations. In fact, if you made a beautiful design and they ruined it in engineering, I want to see the beautiful design. I want to see what you're capable of. Don is just asking for make it available to share. I'll try to make that available to people. I'll probably put it on my blog. Maybe that's the easiest way to just share it that way. Do you have any recommendations for designers transitioning between disciplines? I'm coming from animation and motion design, for example. It's the same things I've been describing. Read About Face by Alan Cooper, become a master of Figma. That's the number one thing. That was weird. If you do those things, it doesn't matter whether you were in animation or motion design. The job is mostly in Figma, working with people, solving problems. And if you read that book, you will get a good basis of like what the jobs are. Okay, so there's a bunch of other questions, but I think that we're out of time and you guys got to go to your next thing. If you want, you can book time with me on ADP List and talk more about these questions. But I hope I gave you a very clear blueprint of what to do. And believe me, 99% of designers are doing a terrible job of getting this job. And there are lots of them out there. We get hundreds of people apply, but only a few of them are actually applicable for what the job is. You could be in that 1%. The work to do is not overwhelming. You can all do it. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you all. And I look forward to seeing you in ADP List sessions.